The Pacific rendition there of the Olympic anthem to open our exciting announcement this morning on behalf of Dr. Robin Mitchell, the President of ONOC, our Vice President Buckley Temeniel, who's joining us online, and our Secretary General, Mr. Rick Blas. I say Mbuluvinaka and a very warm welcome to all of you today, our in-house guests as well as those joining us online, to this important announcement that we're about to make this morning. I also would like to just make mention, and forgive me if I do not cover everyone, but we also invited members of the Diplomatic Corps who are based in Suva, covering the region, present here this morning, our sports stakeholders. In particular, I make a special welcome to presidents, our secretaries general, and executive members of ONOC's membership, our National Olympic Committees within the Oceania region. I make special mention, and they're with us this morning at ONOC House, the representatives from FASANOC. I see the CEO and Secretary General here, as well as staff. I also acknowledge Mr. Peter Maisie of the Fiji National Sports Commission and Mrs. Litiano Lombuka of the Fiji Sports Council, important stakeholders for FASANOC, but also for ONOC with our presence here in Fiji. I make special mention and also acknowledge Mr. Dwayne Kale, Vice President of the International Paralympic Committee, Mr. Paul Bird, President of the Oceania Paralympic Committee and his Executive Board, Jock O'Callaghan, who's President of Paralympics Australia. We welcome you. Mr. Kevin Gosper, President and Chair of OSFO, President of OSFO, and also Chair of the Oceania Australia Foundation. Again, another important partner for ONOC. I also make special mention, joining us in Australia, Mr. Vidya Lakan, who's President of the Pacific Games Council, Mr. Andrew Minogue, CEO of the Pacific Games Council. I also make special mention of Karo Lelai, who's Chair of the ONOC Athletes Commission. Again, they are always at the center of every decision we make, and Karo will be addressing us on behalf of the athletes of Oceania in our program this morning. I welcome her as also members of ONOC's Athletes Commission and any athlete that's joining us this morning. I also would like to mention members and executives of the Organizing Committee for Brisbane 2032. Thank you again for meeting our delegation earlier last month, and we're delighted that you can join us online this morning to witness our announcement. Again, I make mention of Ms. Baklai Temenial, who's Secretary General of the Palau National Olympic Committee. She, as I mentioned earlier, is the Vice President of ONOC, but her, as well as Alvita Rapila, who's Secretary General of the Papua New Guinea National Olympic Committee, they are both members of what they call the Coordination Commission for Brisbane 2032. So I make special mention and acknowledge them as well this morning. Again, to you, our guests that are with us this morning, I'm very pleased to welcome you and those online as well to this formal announcement of ONOC's 10-year roadmap, what we call Creating a Games Advantage, or as you can see on the collateral we have in front of you, Creating Home Games Advantage announcement. From this 23rd of July, 2022, all the way to the 23rd of July, 2032. This is the 10-year program, the first ever. It's an ONOC-wide roadmap to strategically build athletes and the ecosystem of professionals and services required to take Pacific Island athletes to medal at the Olympic Games, in this case, Brisbane 2032, as mentioned. We're using the lessons of athlete journey and performances. ONOC has now strategically decided to plan and roll out a 10-year roadmap, which you'll hear about very shortly, to design and implement an islands-sensitive approach to a long-term athlete development and to the development of sports professionals that support our athletes. This is a mandate we have in the Olympic movement that we as ONOC, or the Continental Association responsible for this region, work with national federations and all our athletes to provide the best in terms of their career, but most importantly in terms of their performance. So today, this is the start of that vision. Exactly 10 years from today, the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Games will open in Queensland, Australia. And I've also been advised, though you probably would have seen it on online, that Brisbane itself, as part of marking the 23rd of July today, they have what they call the Green and Gold Runway. So today, across Australia, hosted by the Queensland government, they have sports events where they are pocket sports events where they're actually introducing Olympic sports to the community. So that's what they're doing today to launch or to mark this 10 years to go to Brisbane 2032. For those of you online and those of you our guests here, in terms of a program, I will just ask our production team to just throw up the order of events, just so that you're aware of how we're going to organize this morning. I did mention it in the housekeeping, but we will have a video message very shortly from Mr. John Coates from the Australian Olympic Committee. Then that would be followed by the project announcement, which Dr. Mitchell will make very shortly. And then we have 3 statements. Again, these are important stakeholders for this project. We have one from the Oceania Paralympic Committee, one from, as I mentioned, the Organization of Sports Federations of Oceania, or OSFO, as well as the Pacific Games Council by Mr. Vidya Lakan. And then Atma, who's up the front beside Dr. Mitchell, will provide the overview. And we do have a brochure that we'll give with you at the very end. And for those of you online, we'll circulate this as well through the registration listing that the platform that was created for this launch. You'll get a copy of this, this brochure that details everything we're launching today. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we will get a response from Ms. Karo Lelai, who's chair of our ONOC Athletes Commission. She's based out of Papua New Guinea, so she will join us when we get to that section of the program to provide a response, if you like, or remarks on behalf of the athletes of Oceania. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the order of events this morning. So as you saw there, I'd like to acknowledge Mr. John Coates. I'm not sure if he's online, but he did say he was going to dial in if he's able to. He's just coming off family bereavement, but by way of introduction, we acknowledge him first for the exceptional work and leadership that he's provided in his capacity then as president of the Australian Olympic Committee to help Brisbane win the hosting rights for 2032. And that's both for the Olympic and the Paralympic Games. By way of introduction, John is now an honorary life member, or life president rather, of the Australian Olympic Committee. He's also, by his role, or as a member of the IOC, is vice president of the International Olympic Committee, the IOC. He's also president of the International Court of Arbitration for Sport, and he's president of the IOC's Legal Commission. And very recently, he was appointed the vice president of the Games Organizing Committee for Brisbane 2032. We have a recorded message from Mr. Coates. We'll now hear from him.
And indeed, all of those games. And
we may start this again once we have the audio fixed. Just bear with us, please. Again, for those of you joining us online, this is the official announcement of the ONOC Creating Home Games Advantage. We were there trying to hear from Mr. John Coates. I believe we have that now ready to roll in, so let's hear from him now. Thank you.
Bulla, Robert Mitchell, and dear friends from Fiji, and indeed all of those here.
I think we might come back to John Coates. We'll do that. We'll come back to John Coates in a while, that recorded message. Again, we apologize for the technical challenges there. But on the program, after John, we're going to now hear from Dr. Robin Mitchell, who will make this official announcement before we get statements from the other stakeholders. As I mentioned, today, the 23rd of July, marks 10 years to go to the start of Brisbane 2032, both the Olympic and the Paralympic Games. To celebrate this important milestone, as I mentioned, Dr. Mitchell, the president of the Oceania National Olympic Committees, or ONOC, will address us and provide us a bit more details on this announcement. Again, for those of you, our stakeholders witnessing this announcement, those of you that are joining us online, and of course, our athletes and sports people of the Pacific Islands and also the Oceania region. By way of introduction, Dr. Mitchell is president of ONOC, as I did say earlier. He's also the IOC, he's an IOC member, and he serves on the IOC Executive Board, and he's been serving on the IOC Executive Board since 2017. He's also acting president of the Association of National Olympic Committees, or ONOC, and in his role with the IOC and with ONOC, he also chairs the Olympic Solidarity Commission. So I'm going to now hand the floor over to Dr. Mitchell to now officially make this announcement. And again, I thank you all for joining us today, online and those in person, to witness this announcement, and make special mention of the media as well, who are going to now spread this information widely after the announcement today. Thank you, Dr. Mitchell.
Valuable Inoke, and good morning to all of the guests here in the ONOC office in Suva, and to those of our colleagues and friends internationally online. I hope we can fix John's message during the course of this morning, because he's the guy that's worked very hard to get, firstly, the Games to Sydney in 2000, as well as the Games that we're hoping to celebrate with many medals for Oceania in 2032. As Inoke mentioned, basically, we are looking at creating a home games advantage. We had that opportunity in Sydney when we had a 7-year lead up to the Olympic Games in Sydney with funding from the Australian Sports Commission and allowing our athletes to train in Australia. Around the lead up to the Olympic Games, we had many new Olympic committees attending the Sydney Olympics, either just before or for the oldies like Fiji and Papua New Guinea for quite a while, since the mid-50s. So we didn't really take advantage in the sense that technically many of our athletes weren't up to the level to be competitive. But on behalf of ONOC and its sports stakeholders, I have much pleasure in announcing a special 10-year campaign to create a home games advantage for the Pacific Islands. Today marks 10 years to the opening ceremony of the 2032 Olympic Games in Brisbane, Australia. To celebrate this important milestone, we're now launching a campaign to create a home games advantage for the athletes of the Pacific Islands, as well as the whole Oceania region. The impetus is for us to promptly organize ourselves and produce the best result ever by the Pacific Islands, New Zealand, and indeed Australia at our very own home games. ONOC, with the mandate to develop Olympic sport in the region, is leading the initiative on behalf of its members, the National Olympic Committees of the Pacific Islands and for the Oceania region. Our sporting partners during this journey include, as Inoke mentioned, our host National Olympic Committee, the Australian Olympic Committee, the Oceania Paralympic Committee and the host NPC, Paralympics Australia, the Organisation of Sports Federations of Oceania, OSFO, the Commonwealth Games Federation Oceania and the host CGA, Commonwealth Games Australia, the Pacific Games Council, the Oceania Australia Foundation, and the National Sports Federations and National Paralympic Committees. During this 10-year journey, we'll undertake a phased approach, reviewing the progress and our programs with major milestones, leveraging the Paris 2024 Olympic Games, the 2026 Commonwealth Games in Victoria, Australia, and the Los Angeles Olympic Games in 2028. In between, we have major competitions that we have the pleasure of being able to compete in, including the Asian Games next year, the Solomon Islands Pacific Games, 2024, as I mentioned, Paris, 2025, the Pacific Mini Games, and it rolls on with competitions every year, sometimes 2 to 3 international events. ONOC is seeking to design and resource a targeted long-term strategy with world-class leadership and a holistic high-performance environment to ensure optimum success for the Pacific at Brisbane 2032. In the 2-year lead-up period to the Paris Olympic Games, ONOC will be carrying out an audit on the resources, facilities, and the specific needs in each Pacific Island NOC. It is important that we make full use of Olympic solidarity resources and funding and other identified resources in country to ensure adequate preparation of our athletes and their supporting entourage. Our Brisbane-based project team is led by its chair, Kevin Gosper, former president of ONOC, Andrew Minogue, the CEO of the Pacific Games Council, and our program lead for the project, Atma Maharaj. That's this one. In Brisbane, based in Brisbane. They've all been very proactive in establishing relationships and have had preliminary discussions with a number of potential long-term Australian partners for the campaign. We have initiated dialogue with the Australian government through its responsible department. In June, we had the opportunity to meet Andrew Laveris, the president of Brisbane 2032, and the newly appointed staff of the organizing committee to discuss the potential areas of collaboration with Brisbane 2032, aligned to our secondary and legacy objectives. Brisbane 2032 President Andrew Laveris assured me that they look forward to working with us over the coming decade to ensure Brisbane 2032 as an Olympic and Paralympic Games that will benefit the Oceania region as a whole. With a stake now firmly in the ground with today's announcement, we will leverage and build on these foundations, as well as reach out to all the potential strategic and program partners within Australia. Additionally, over the coming months, we plan to start conversations with a wide range of stakeholders, including the governments and NOCs, NPCs, CGAs of future host nations, Paris, Los Angeles, which I mentioned, and the Victoria Commonwealth Games. On the 29th of July, the day after the opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games, I'll be meeting with the New Zealand contingent, and in September, we'll be traveling to New Zealand to meet with the government, the Olympic Committee, and Sports New Zealand. NOCs and NPCs and their respective governments and stakeholders for the Pacific Island Forum dialogue partners and nations outside of Oceania will be contacted and continue the relationship that already exists. With the countdown now on, ONOC with its sports stakeholders invite Australian and international partners to join hands with us now in support of the dedicated program being developed for Brisbane 2032. These shared and pooled resources and partnerships will help in creating a powerful, results-oriented, long-term program of which the whole region will be very proud of. Today's official announcement of the program provides a call to action that we need to seize the moment as if 2023 is now. Thank you.
Can we please acknowledge and applaud Dr. Mitchell for that announcement? Again, if I can borrow Dr. Mitchell's words in his statement, this program that we're announcing today provides a call to action and the need to seize the moment because 2032 is now. Thank you, Dr. Mitchell, for that announcement. I've been told that we can go back to John Coates' message earlier, recorded message. So, as mentioned, he has been instrumental in his leadership through the bid and Brisbane's success in winning the hosting rights for Brisbane 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games. We'll go back to his message now.
Bulla Robert Mitchell and dear friends from Fiji and indeed all of Oceania. The 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games in Brisbane will be the Together Games, and that means that they will also be the Games for not only Australia but the Games for all of Oceania. We in the Australian Olympic Committee, and Brisbane's involved in this, are already planning for the performance of our athletes in those games. We also think it's important that we help our friends from Oceania prepare their athletes, and it's important that we start this process now. All of the high performance and other planning that needs to go into this has to start now if we're to achieve results that haven't been seen before from our Oceania colleagues. So I'm a Vice President now of the Brisbane 2032 Games, and I can assure you that we're as committed as our friends from Oceania in achieving success for our friends, all of the athletes from Oceania. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you. Goodbye.
John Coates there with a recorded message, again providing the overview of this initiative, but we also acknowledge him for his role in the successful bid for Brisbane 2032 for the Olympic and Paralympic Games, as well as his support to this ONOC initiative. We now move to the next statement, and the following three statements I'm going to have to now read on their behalf. So the first is, as I mentioned earlier, on the order of events that we shared with you. We're delighted that ONOC has been working symbiotically with the Oceania Paralympic Committee, or OPC in short, as an important stakeholder for this initiative. Again, as I mentioned, I have much pleasure in reading a message from Mr. Paul Bird, who is joining us on the program from the Gold Coast. And by way of introduction, he's the president of the Oceania Paralympic Committee, the OPC. He's also a Paralympic gold medalist for Australia. He was chef de mission for the Australian Paralympic Games, and he's also a board member of Paralympics Australia. I will now read the message, the statement that Paul shared with us. And while we do that, we'll have a picture of him on the screen while I read his statement. Paul writes in to say today the Oceania Paralympic Committee is excited to be a partner with ONOC in the Home Games Advantage initiative that sets a clear and achievable pathway through to Brisbane 2032 and beyond for parasport and inclusion within the Oceania region. He says this is a defining moment for parasport. He says the ONOC strategy creates a once-in-a-generation opportunity to become a united, competitive, and inclusive region, and already is creating momentum within our parasporting communities across the Pacific. We look forward with exception and anticipation of the positive outcomes for all current and future athletes within our region. Signed, Paul Bird, President, Oceania Paralympic Committee. Again, thank you, Mr. Bird, for your statement and for joining us as well online. Ladies and gentlemen, the next statement, and again I have the pleasure of reading, is on behalf of the Oceania Organization of Sports Federations of Oceania, or OSFO. And this message is from Mr. Kevin Gosper, who also is the chair of the Brisbane-based working group for this initiative. Dr. Mitchell did talk about this in his announcement, and then you'll hear from Atma Maharaj later on, who is the secretariat to this working committee, on the details of this initiative. And as mentioned earlier, we do have a brochure that we will hand out that you can take away with you that details the approach of this project, as well as for those of you online, we will circulate the electronic version of this Creating Home Games Advantage information paper. By way of introduction, Mr. Gosper is the doyen of ONOC, having served the Pacific region for over 60 years, including 20 years as the president of ONOC. He, as I mentioned, is the president of OSFO, the Organization of Sports Federations of Oceania, and he's also the honorary chair of the Oceania Australia Foundation, who I mentioned partners, important partners in the work in this initiative, but also for ONOC. Mr. Gosper is listening in from the Sunshine Coast, and as I mentioned, he's asked me to read out his statement today. The statement reads, being associated with the development of the Brisbane 2032 initiative, I am very pleased to extend my personal support and that of OSFO and the Foundation to help in bringing this initiative to life. It is very encouraging and valuable that ONOC is looking 10 years ahead to develop the competitive edge of the athletes of the Pacific Islands. These 10 years will pass very quickly. With the current focus on the Birmingham Commonwealth Games, which begins next Friday, the 28th of July, preparations will then shift to the all-important Pacific Games, which will be held in Honiara in November 2023. He says Paris 2024 is just around the corner, with qualification events already underway. The 2023 Pacific Games will also serve as a qualification event in a number of sports to Paris 2024. He says, as president of OSFO, the Organization of Sports Federations of Oceania, we are excited to be part of such an innovative project. Our regional sports federations will have a great canvas on which to develop the capacity and capability of our athletes, coaches, and our technical officials. As chair of the Oceania Australia Foundation, I'm also pleased to highlight that the foundation has awarded 50 scholarships, 24 of these being female recipients, since the program commenced in 2011. A total of 8 NOCs have benefited from this program, with the recipients of these scholarships coming from namely Fiji, Papua New Guinea, FSM, Guam, the Marshall Islands, Palau, Samoa, and the Solomon Islands. He says, as we move forward, we are looking to upscaling the foundation to increase the opportunities for our student athletes as we build towards the Brisbane 2032 Games. He ends this ONOC initiative with the sports stakeholders of the Pacific is a very worthwhile and commendable venture. I encourage the support of your governments and sport organizations on this journey. Kevin Gosper. Can we please acknowledge Kevin Gosper for his statement this morning? Again, the final statement, which I have also been asked to read before we then hear from Atma, is from Fiji's Vidya Lakan, who is a life member of FASANOC. He has been the longest-serving president of the Pacific Games Council, or PGC, and he's currently in Brisbane, which is why he's asked us to read this message. And he's visiting his mum, who turns a grand 102 years young tomorrow, Sunday the 24th of July. I think Vidya's joining us online as well. So a hearty congratulations to Mrs. Lakan Sr., the matriarch of the Lakan family. But now to Mr. Lakan's statement for this announcement today. The 2031 Pacific Games will be a vital focal point for the Pacific's Brisbane 2032 aspirations. He says the Pacific Games Council has been working with ONOC since 2014 on achieving international recognition of the Pacific Games as the Continental Games for Oceania. Much progress has been made since 2015, when the integration of Australia and New Zealand athletes into Pacific Games competitions commenced. He says many international federations now use the Pacific Games as their Olympic qualifying events. It is the Pacific Games Council's ambition that the 2031 edition of the Pacific Games will serve as a Brisbane 2032 qualification event for all of the Olympic sports on the program. Signed, Vidya Lakan, President, Pacific Games Council. Again, can we acknowledge Mr. Lakan for his statement? And as I highlighted on the order of events for our program, we have 2 more speakers before we close off this official announcement. And we'll hear live very shortly from Mr. Atma Maharaj, who Dr. Mitchell had introduced. He, again, by way of introduction, is the program lead for this Brisbane 2032 initiative for ONOC. By way of introduction, he was the former Secretary General and Senior Vice President of FASANOC. He was Director of Sponsorship and Marketing for the 2003 Pacific Games in Fiji, former President and now life member of Weightlifting Fiji, former Secretary General of Athletics Fiji, and he's currently a successful coach, mentor, team manager, chef de mission for a number of Fiji teams. With those words of introduction, I invite us to put our hands together to welcome Atma Maharaj, who will give us the finer details of this announcement. Can we please make him welcome?
Thank you, ONOC. Thank you, everybody. In 1996, Paya Wolfgram, super heavyweight boxer from Tonga, won Pacific's first ever Olympic medal when he won the silver medal at the Atlanta Olympic Games, losing only in the final to Vladimir Klitschko. His brother is the mayor of Kiev. In 2008, Ele Opolange of Samoa won a silver medal in the 75+ women's weightlifting category in Beijing. Also, in 2008, at the Paralympic Games, Francis Compound of Papua New Guinea won a silver in the 100 meters in athletics T46 class. In 2012, Ilyasa Delana of Fiji won the Pacific's first ever gold medal at any Olympic or Paralympic Games winning the high jump men's F42 class at the London Paralympic Games. This was followed by the back-to-back gold medal wins in Rio 2016 and Tokyo 2020 by the Fiji men's rugby team, and the amazing performance by the Fiji women's rugby team to win the bronze in Tokyo. 7 of the 15 Pacific Island members of ONOC have produced a top 8 results to date. These inspiring performances demonstrate that Pacific Islands are capable of being world beaters on any day. With 10 years to the opening ceremony of Brisbane 2032, ONOC, with its sports stakeholders, have set out an ambitious vision with a detailed guiding strategy for this initiative. At the ONOC's General Assembly in Nandi in May this year, ONOC sports stakeholders unanimously agreed on a set of challenging performance targets focused around pathways and performance as its primary objective. This ambitious and yet practical aspirational goal is to produce a 300 to 500% improvement on Pacific Islands' previous Olympic Games and Paralympic performances at the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Let us picture this. You may close your eyes and picture it, but let us picture this. The Pacific Islands collectively winning no less than 4 gold medals, 8 medals in total, with 16 plus top 8 finishes, with 50 plus individual athletes and 8 sporting teams qualifying on merit for the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Games. This is achievable if we, as Dr. Mitchell said, is a call to action. The journey starts now. Similarly, we have with our colleagues from OPC set out ambitious performance outcomes for the Brisbane 2032 Paralympic Games as well. Similarly, in terms of gold medals, total medals, top 8 finishes, individual athletes and sports teams qualifying on merit. If we can achieve these with the support of all our stakeholders and prospective partners, then we'll be able to tap into the true potential of the Pacific sports and establish a platform for even further improvement in performances for future games. The opportunities extend well beyond just the performance outcomes in the sporting field. Our performance goals are complemented by secondary objectives around events and engagement, and legacy objectives around capacity development and empowerment. Brisbane 2032 is an ideal catalyst to proactively create a revolution and a giant leap forward to build capacity, strengthen relationships, deliver performance outcomes, generate sustainable and positive change throughout the region with a legacy well beyond 2032. Brisbane 2032 must go beyond inspiration and must be remembered as the games that gives Pacific Islands a new way of thinking, a new level of outcomes, and new levels of performance that has never been seen before, but will be seen again post-2032. The Games must provide unparalleled focused opportunities for driving talent identification to produce a much larger pool of quality next generation of athletes. We must create a genuine pathway for high potential athletes with constant opportunities to compete and train at a world-class level that results in these multiple podium performances. We must provide a supportive, safe, and enabling environment with a holistic development of the athletes and their well-being, and continue to enhance ONOC's long-standing commitment to strengthen the capacity and equality of women and girls. This enabling environment must grow the pool of high-performance coaches and provide access to performance psychology, games analysis, sports science, and all the best practices in high-performing sports. Our athletes deserve the continuous access to affordable international class training facilities, resourced with proper rehabilitation and recovery facilities, strength and conditioning, and the like, to spearhead an effective, high-performance daily athlete training environment. We have a date with ourselves. We need to support this giant leap forward by ensuring strong governance, by strengthening the capability, the systems, the resourcing, and the capacity of member federations of the National Olympic Committees and the National Paralympic Committees. Our sports stakeholders will work diligently to identify priority Olympic and Paralympic sports which are tailored to individual country strengths and establish dedicated domestic Brisbane 2032 delivery teams characterized with a growth mindset, continuous improvement within a learning organization culture. With the program now publicly launched, we are actually moving into our third phase, the foundation phase of the initiative, with the lead up to Paris 2024. We had the planning phase, then we have the launch phase, and now we are into our foundation phase, setting up all the structures to ensure that we can support it in the long term. So working in collaboration with our sports stakeholders, our focus will be to develop and design detailed design and bespoke programs for upcoming games, and also develop targeted position papers to support each of our objectives. We intend to establish specialist working groups to explore the strategic priority areas in the guiding strategy. The working groups will develop best practice case studies, teaching material, program resources, as well as identifying the various metrics for the monitoring and evaluation for each targeted area. Work has already started on the development of policies, comprehensive financial plans, structured reporting, and full governance framework required to activate this program. We will continue to engage with our prospective Australian-based partners while initiating discussions with future Games hosts, as well as Pacific Island Forum Dialogue Forum partners and nations outside of Oceania. Our next 12 months is critical towards securing long-term partnerships on which the Pacific Island athletes can build on and thrive. With this focused approach, we will not only produce new levels of performance and legacy outcomes, but we will collectively provide tangible and measurable long-term results and benefits for the Pacific and all its partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Atma, for the overview. And as mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, and for those of you online, we will hand out the information paper that has further details on the announcement we're making today. Again, it is an announcement because we're claiming the space here, and we're doing this alongside what Brisbane 2032 are also doing today. And as Atma mentioned, it is a phased approach, and we, as part of your presence here today, you will be on our distribution list to receive updates as we develop the initiative further. I did mention that we have Karo Lelai from our ONOC Athletes Commission. Karo is based in Papua New Guinea. She's served with ONOC and also working with our Athletes Commission for a while now. She's also a member of the ANOC Athletes Commission and also the IOC Athletes Commission. Karo is going to also respond to the announcement today. So I'm going to now cross over to Papua New Guinea and invite Karo to address us on behalf of the Athletes Commission, but also on behalf of the athletes of Oceania. Thank you, Karo.
Thank you, Noke. Just a mic test. Can you hear me clearly?
Loud and clear, yes.
Thank you very much. Well, on behalf of all of the athletes from the Pacific Islands, I would like to congratulate ONOC and all the sports stakeholders from the Oceania region, the Pacific Islands, Australia, and New Zealand, of course, for your farsightedness and leadership to develop such a long-term and purposeful program. The program will help find the next generation of athletes across the priority sports for our respective national Olympic committees. We will reignite the true potential of our youth through strong and vibrant junior development programs with high retention rates to sustain our high performance strategies. A long-term athlete development approach will ensure that the relevant national sports federations can develop the athlete holistically with support towards their education and career development, whilst also developing their athletic ability. I urge the sports administrators, coaches, technical officials, and national leaders to work diligently with urgency to enhance your relevant programs for talent development while supporting the established athletes to work towards producing the aspirational goals for this initiative. National sports federations and national Paralympic committees will need to be properly resourced and function effectively in order to undertake these heightened programs and deliver the desired outcomes. The athletes and the yet to be identified talent of the Pacific Islands will be forever grateful to all the strategic and program partners who come on board and support this undertaking. You will be very proud and satisfied that you have helped produce new benchmark of performances for the Pacific Islands, whilst also developing the next generation of regional and national sports leaders who will take up leadership roles in international sport in the lead up to and after the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Games. We are all in this boat together. I'd like to close with a quote from John F. Kennedy. There are risks in this initiative, and the Athletes Commission is always here to provide any support and advice that we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we please applaud and acknowledge Karo Lelai there? Joining us live from Papua New Guinea with a statement on behalf of the ONOC Athletes Commission. We lost the bottom of her closing there with the quote. I have it in front of me. If I can read it, there are risks and costs to action, but they are far less than the long-range risks of comfortable inaction. Quote by John F. Kennedy. Thank you, Karo, for your statement, and thank you as well for that quote. I love the end. We're all in this boat together. And equally important, a hearing from Karo on behalf of the athletes of Oceania. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the formalities. And as mentioned, it is an announcement. We will officially launch the program, but we thought we'd take advantage of this 23rd of July, 10 years to go, on the back of what the Brisbane 2032 organizing committee are doing today. And as mentioned, we will share with you the handout, and we'll also have it available for those of you online. We also invite you to follow our ONOC communication channels, our social media channels. You can also subscribe to our newsletters. But for today, we've developed the hashtag Oceania Road to Brisbane 32. If you are going to be sharing images from here or any content, you can use that hashtag Oceania Road to Brisbane, in short BNE 32, and of course our ONOC hashtag of Oceania Together. This simple act will ensure that you receive again by subscribing our news on the programs, and especially the initiatives that will come out of the committee and the working group. And I'd like to close by saying, again, for those of you that are joining us online, if you're an athlete from any part of the Pacific or in any diaspora, a parent, a coach, a technical official, or a physical education teacher, a retired athlete, know that this program has space and will need all of us to bring this regional dream to fruition. Be with us, stay with us, complete this dream with us. Like we did when we opened, we again will close with the Olympic anthem. Thank you once again for those of you online, and for those of you who are here with us in person. Thank you for giving up your Saturday to join us, and we're going to treat you to some refreshments as we close up the program. But again, we say thank you, and we bid our online viewers farewell for now as we close with the Olympic anthem.
Rising to the fervent spirit of the game. Let's blend in the vein each golden beat from victory fame. And love, fraternity, and fellowship surround the soul of every nation. Proclaim eternally your firmament of light. Illuminate us with your everlasting light. That praise and beauty and magnificence shine like the sun, blazing above as long as your word, the truth and light.
So we're now off air. Dr. Mitchell.